Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dan Ariely as this year's hooding ceremony keynote speaker. May the force be with you.
Greetings. I want to talk today about the dark side of human nature. I want to talk today a little bit about self-control. Self-control is about the fact that we sometimes know what's good for us in the long term, but we fail to act on it. So think to yourself for a second. How many of you in the last month have eaten more than you wished you would? In the last month, how many of you have gotten less exercise than you wish you would? For how many of you, raising your hand has been the most amount of exercise you got? How many of you have ever texted while driving? Come on. Now, of course, you know this is incredibly stupid, right? Nobody ever said, you know, I thought about it. I thought about how much I want to stay alive, how much I don't want to kill other people. How important is this text message right now? And I decided that this was worth it. No, we know this is a mistake, but when the moment comes and the phone vibrates or calls, we feel the urge to answer it. And last question, how many of you have ever had unplanned, unprotected sex? Nobody. That's amazing. We could talk about lying another time. So what is it about self-control? Here's a very general way to think about it. Imagine I gave you a choice, and I said, what would you rather have? A half a box of chocolate right now, or a full box of chocolate in a week? Half an hour or full in a week, and I passed the chocolate around so you could see it, you could smell it. It was this close. Under those conditions, how many of you would wait another week to get a slightly bigger box of chocolate? Maybe a few. I'm willing to bet that if the chocolate was actually passing around, there would be fewer of you that would do it. But imagine that we push the choices to the future. And he said, what would you rather have? A half a box of chocolate in a year or a full box of chocolate in a year and a week? Now, how many of you would wait another week for another half a box of chocolate? I'm guessing everybody. Why? Because in the future, we are wonderful people. We will exercise, we will diet, everything will be fantastic in the future. Of course, we never get to live in that future. We get to live in the present, and in the present, we make mistake after mistake after mistake. So this is the problem of self-control, and now the question is, what can we do about it? And I want to kind of propose two mechanisms. The first one was inspired by my own experience. When I was in grad school here, I was diagnosed with a liver disease. When I was in hospital many years ago in Israel, I got a bad blood transfusion and I got a liver disease, and for many years they didn't know what it was. And from time to time I had a flare-up and my liver didn't function very well. And in my last 2 years of grad school, I had another one of those flare-ups. I checked myself into the hospital and they told me I had hepatitis C. By that time they could diagnose the problem. And they asked me whether I want to go on an FDA trial for a medication called interferon. Interferon was a medication that was originally approved for hairy cell leukemia, and they were trying to figure out whether it would prove to cure hepatitis C. And I said, what happens if I don't take this medication? And they described to me what it feels like to die from liver cirrhosis. So I didn't think about it for very long. I took the medications. The problem was that these injections were incredibly unpleasant. Every time I took the medication, I got sick for the whole night. Vomiting, headache, fever, shaking, stuff like that. Not as bad as dying from liver cirrhosis, but for sure and now. And think about this trade-off. Taking a medication now that would make me incredibly sick for something that might cure me in 30 years. I took these medications 3 times a week for a year and a half. And at the end of this period, I had another liver biopsy. I beat the disease. That was good news. The FDA later approved interferon. That was also good news. But my physician told me I was the only patient in the protocol that took the medication on time. And the question is, how come? Do I like my liver more? Do I don't have self-control? The answer is none of those. The answer is that I love movies. If I had time, I would watch lots and lots of movies. Sadly, I don't have much time, so I don't watch many movies. But on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, which were injection days, I made a deal with myself. I would, first thing in the morning, go and rent a few videos I really wanted to watch. I would carry them in my backpack the whole day, looking forward to watching them. I would come home, I would put the video in, I would inject myself, and I would press play. I did not wait for the side effects to start. I connected something I did not want, the injection, with something I wanted, the video. And we call this principle reward substitution. And the idea is that there are many things in life that we are just not designed to care about. We're just not designed to care about anything that would happen 30 years from now. But my trick, reward substitution, got me to care about something else, movies. Not that important. You know, if you made a list of what's important in life, livers will be high up there. Movies, not so much. But the problem with the liver is the effect on the liver will be 30 years from now. So by caring about the movies immediately, I behaved as if I cared about my liver. And this is the idea of reward substitution, is to recognize that if we don't care about something that would happen long in the future, maybe we could create a more proximal goal, something that is closer in time, and by acting toward this goal, we can act as if we care about other goals. So let's just think about two such problems. The first one is global warming. Think to yourself whether people can care about global warming. The answer is most certainly no. You know, if you think about it the other way and you say, let's search the whole world for the one problem that would maximize human apathy, you would come up with global warming. Long in the future, would happen to other people first. We don't see it progressing. We don't see anybody suffering. And anything we would do as individuals is a drop in the bucket. Can people wake up and care and say, today I'm going to do something? Very, very unlikely. But can we create reward substitution? Can we give people other rewards that through them they would behave as if they care about the environment? I think the Prius is a wonderful example for that. Right? My non-scientific observation is that people who drive Priuses smile more than other people. Here they are, they're driving their hybrid, and they get to think of themselves that they are wonderful, kind human beings, and that everybody else recognizes that. What would happen if we tried to get other people to recognize the temperature we set our thermostat, or how much insulation we get in the attic? Lots of things like that. Let's take one more example. There's a medication called Coumadin. Coumadin is an anti-stroke medication. It's a relatively good anti-stroke medication. It reduces chances of a second stroke from about 24% to about 4%. And with those odds, you would think that people who had a stroke would really want to take Coumadin on time, but compliance rate is not so high. So let's think about reward substitution. For reward substitution, we need two things. We need to measure, and then we need to either reward or punish. How do we measure whether people take the medication on time? There's a new device called internet-enabled pill boxes. These are pill boxes that every time somebody opens them and takes their pill, it registers online. So now think of yourself, what are the possibilities to reward or punish people once we know that they're taking the medication? So think about some suggestion. What would you try, right? What kind of things you could try? So you could say, let's post it on Facebook. Let's send a letter to their mothers. Let's lock the refrigerator, shut down the internet. I mean, there's lots of things we could try and do to basically give people immediate reward for taking the medication on time. Here's some things that we and some other of our colleagues have tried. The first thing we tried was we said, what if we paid people $3 a day to take their medication on time? What do you think happens? Absolutely nothing. What do you think would happen if we paid people $1,000 a day to take the medication on time? I'm guessing that will work. You know, we didn't test it for obvious reasons. We don't have $1,000. Even if it might work, it's not a reasonable solution. So the next thing we tried was to use a principle called loss aversion. Loss aversion is the idea that people hate losing much more than they enjoy gaining. So we said, what if we charge people $3 every time they don't take the medication? Turns out that's much better. But the nicest solution came up from combining two things. The first thing was combining lotteries. Lotteries is a very strange thing. Economists call lottery a taxation on stupidity, but people love lotteries. So what do you think happens if you give people, every time they take the medication on time, a lottery ticket that gives them 10% chance of making $30? Turns out that's much better. But the nicest combination was to combine lotteries with regret. Now, what is regret? Regret is a really interesting human emotion. Regret is about the fact that our happiness is not driven by where we are, it's driven by where we are compared to something else that we can imagine vividly. And if this other reality we can imagine vividly is better, we feel miserable. And if this other reality we can imagine is worse, we feel good about ourselves. So for example, when would you be more upset? If you missed your flight by 2 minutes or by 2 hours? By 2 minutes. Why? Because you can imagine the many ways in which you would have made it. You could say, if the light changed a little faster, if the person in line in front of me understood what taking your shoes off means, if the TSA agent had one more IQ point. And you can basically think about this other alternative reality, and because it's so close, you compare yourself to this other reality and you feel bad. If you missed your flight by 2 hours, you can't imagine that reality. Similarly, a few Olympics ago, they took pictures of people who won medals, and they looked at how big were their smiles. And what would you expect? Gold, silver, bronze. What did they find? Gold, bronze, silver. Why? Imagine you trained for the last 4 years, and a minute and a half ago you got the silver medal. What are you thinking to yourself? This close. This close. And if you got the bronze, what are you thinking? At least I'm here, look at everybody else. So our happiness is often driven not by where we are, but what we compare ourselves to. How do you incorporate this into our experiment? So imagine all of you are on Coumadin, people on my right are taking the medication on time, people on my left are not. If we just do the lottery, I sample 10% of you and give you the lottery ticket. If I try to incorporate regret, I give the lottery ticket to everybody, whether you took the medication or not. And I call you up and I say, congratulations, you're the winner of the coveted lottery. The stars are smiling on you. Sadly, I see you did not take your pill today, so you're not getting the money. This is the essence of regret. Now you can think about a small act that you could have done that would have put you on the other side of that fence. And together, lottery and regret get compliance on Coumadin to be about 98%. So the sad news is that we have a lot of challenges with self-control. The good news is that we could do something about it. If we understand reward substitution and we understand how to re-incentivize people to do things in our long-term best interest by short-term incentives, we can actually get behavior to be better. I do want to point out to one more mechanism. This is a mechanism called Ulysses contracts. If you remember from the mythology, Ulysses knew that if the sirens will come, he will be tempted. So he asked the sailors to tie him to the mast, and he asked the sailors to put wax in their ears. And this way, he could not act on his temptation, and the sailors could not be tempted. In modern days, it's as if Ulysses took his cell phone and put it in the trunk, so he could hear the call of the cell phone, but couldn't act on it. And for the sailor, it was as if he turned the phone off. There's lots of mechanisms like that, and you can think about all kinds of behaviors that you probably do that have this taste. For example, what happens if you don't buy cake? You can think to yourself, let me buy cake, I'll bring it home, and I'll eat a small piece every other day. Very unlikely. You probably recognize that if you'll have a big cake at home, you'll probably eat too much of it, so you choose to reduce temptation from the get-go. One of the students that worked in the Media Lab when I was there did a very nice alarm clock. This is an alarm clock called Clocky. And clock is an alarm clock with two big wheels that run in slightly different speeds. When you go to sleep, you think to yourself that you're the kind of person that wakes up at 6 in the morning and goes for a run. So you set up your alarm clock to go off at 6. And then 6 o'clock in the morning comes around and you are no longer that person. You're a different person with a different set of preferences, and you look for the snooze button, but if you have Clocky is now running around the room. And Clocky is running around the room in an unpredictable way, and you have to get up and you have to hunt it down. Goes under furniture. By the time you find it, you're awake. The fatal design flaw of the first version of Clocky, by the way, is that by the time people found it, they were also pissed off. So there's lots of Clockies with the wheels torn off. So now there's a new design that is egg-like, that doesn't have any parts that you can break. And I think the next design would actually fight back. There's an even better version called Snooze and Lose. Snooze and Lose is an alarm clock that is connected to your checking account. And to a charity you hate. Right? Now try and snooze. We did it in one other way. It turns out in the history of the world, nobody ever woke up and said, "Today I feel like colonoscopy." It's funnier if you're a parent at that age. So what happened when people wake up and it's a day for colonoscopy? They find other things to do that are more urgent. So we asked people, when we scheduled for them a colonoscopy, we said, "Would you give us a check for $500? And if you show up to your colonoscopy on time, we'll give you the money back. But if you're late or you miss the appointment, you lose the money." This is the kind of a promise that people can only either get the same or lose money. There's nothing to gain aside from self-control. And more than 50% of the people are willing to accept that deal, give us the check, and try to get their self-control under control. There was a very sad analysis that looked at the percentage of human mortality that is caused by bad decision-making. And when you try to estimate what percentage of human mortality was aided or caused by bad decision-making 100 years ago, it was about 10%. When you try to look at the same percent now, it's slightly more than 40. How come? As we invent new technologies, we also invent ways to kill ourselves. Obesity, diabetes, smoking, texting while driving. All of those decisions, it's not that a single decision kills us, but a long sequence of bad decisions could be incredibly harmful. And if you think about this perspective, this is all about self-control, and it also tells us that the self-control problems are only going to get worse. Think about it. The commercial world around us is only interested in us giving them time, money, and attention right now. Right? Donuts. The next version of the donut 2.0, is it going to be more or less tempting? More tempting. Is the next version of Facebook going to be more or less tempting? Is the next version of the smartphone going to be more or less tempting? The reality is that the commercial world around us is trying to tempt us all the time to spend our time, money, energy, and so on, and we need to figure out ways to fight back. So self-control problems, or problems of Adam and Eve and temptation, are with us, they are substantial, are large, and we need to figure out how to fight them. Beyond that, self-control is just one example of a human folly. It's just one example of a problem we have. And as fellow academics, you are in charge of designing the next version of the world. Think about it. Everything we have, starting from healthcare policy to physical products to food to regulations, all of those are things that we are designing, man-made, and you're going to take part in this design. And the question is, what kind of future are you going to design? What kind of environment are you going to design for people to take actions in? And I know that you're going to design things that are compatible with human limitations. We have a choice. Are we designing things for human beings so we can make better decisions, or are we designing things for people to make worse decisions? And in advance, I know that you'll take the right path, and I want to thank you in advance for helping us design a better future, and may the force be with you.